Prior to giving the floor to the representatives of political groups, let me just say to colleagues, particularly those who are linked up in remote, that there's been a problem with the voting system. It's now been resolved and it's now possible to vote. The deadline for you to cast your vote is therefore extended until 11 o'clock, and the announcement of the results, as previously said, will be at 1:30 this afternoon. Let me now give the floor to Mr. Muresan on behalf of the EPP.
President Michel, Vice President Šefčovič, Chief Negotiator Michel Barnier, welcome back to the European Parliament. Dear colleagues, in times of crisis, the citizens of the European Union expect that we provide solutions to the problems that they are facing. Whenever there is a crisis, whenever people face difficulties, they expect that the European Union helps them. This was the case 10 years ago during the economic and financial crisis. This was the case 5 years ago during the migration and refugee crisis. And this is the case now during the corona crisis. The fact that people expect us to deliver in times of crisis shows that they believe we can deliver. It shows a genuine trust of the people in Europe into the European institutions, and this is why we need to provide now what people expect of us, provide solutions. These are times in which we have to trust science, trust the authorities, work together, stay united, keep in mind that facts matter, defend together a rules-based society, trust politicians who have solutions, and say loud and clear the institutions of the European Union delivered in overcoming the crisis and under Michel Barnier's leadership in keeping the EU together in the negotiations for finding the best possible relationship with the United Kingdom for the future. The developments of recent days have shown to us that passing relatively well through a first wave of corona crisis is no guarantee of passing well through the second and through the third wave. The developments of recent days have shown to us that the corona crisis is not a short-term crisis, but it will be at least a medium-term crisis with consequences potentially for the long term. And when people expect us to do more, when we have a crisis where it's clear that united we can pass it better, when people expect us to do more, we need to equip the European Union with the tools it needs to overcome the crisis, and one of our essential tools is the budget of the European Union. The EPP Group, we are committed to a quick conclusion of the negotiations on the EU budget and on the Recovery and Resilience Facility so that both instruments can enter into force on the 1st of January 2021. We do respect the many good elements of the agreement of the July European Council. However, we want to find solutions to allocate further resources where they are needed. We saw in recent weeks the EU health programmes need more money. And this is why, Mr. President Sassoli, I would like to support what you have publicly said yesterday. The creation of the Recovery and Resilience Facility of Next Generation EU should not become a burden for the budget of the European Union. I would like to support what President Sassoli said yesterday. We should not place the interest payments for Next Generation EU within the EU budget. We should not have less money for farmers, for researchers, for students, because we have created the Recovery and Resilience Facility. And as the rapporteur for the Recovery and Resilience Facility, I would like to tell our colleagues in the Council that we are working and respecting our schedule here in the European Parliament. We will be delivering. We have no delays here. We will adopt our position in November. Be ready for the final negotiations with the Council. And the message to the people is we will provide the facility that will help them overcome this crisis and which will protect them for the next crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Muresan. Now, on behalf of the Socialists and Democrats group, let me give the floor to Mrs. Garcia Perez, please. Thank you, President. The virus is back. It's once again striking Europe. Restrictions are affecting the lives of our people and life in our cities. The second wave is pushing our health systems against the ropes once again. We have over 4 million cases of infections in Europe now. That's a doubling in a couple of weeks. An IMF report published recently says that there's a collapse going on in Europe. We now see a massive increase in poverty and inequality, as has been recalled by the European Network Against Poverty. It's unacceptable that around 22% of the EU's population is currently at risk of poverty or social exclusion. And if all of this wasn't sufficient, the horizon is darkening with the potential of a no-deal Brexit at the end of the year. We cannot be complacent. We need to learn from our results. Mr. Barnier, you have the support of the Socialist and Democrats family in your final efforts to achieve the best possible relations with the United Kingdom. But let's not do that at the cost of sacrificing, for example, the internal market. We shouldn't accept distorted state aid or social or environmental dumping either. We also need to avoid the mistakes we've made in the past. And I think it's important to refer to something that the Council didn't discuss, but the Parliament continues to insist on, which is the need now more than ever to hold this conference on the future of Europe so that we have the tools we need to deal with the challenges of our time. Mr. Michel, we can't go back to the austerity that since 2008 has undermined our well-being. We believe that education is the best antidote to extremism, and therefore, why are you looking at reducing the budget for Erasmus? You say that science is the best thing to deal with climate problems, etc. Why are you cutting budgets there? We want to see strategic independence in Europe, particularly for health. So why are health budgets being cut? And let's not forget that we also need to support those who are suffering the most in Africa and Latin America, because we have to be clear that none of us will be safe until all of us are safe. Let's take advantage of the recovery plan and the budget to save lives and jobs and to compensate for the debt incurred by the crisis. Let's listen to the IMF. We need higher taxes on the wealthier individuals and businesses that we have so that we can protect the most vulnerable. We have the resources we need. We also need own resources, and we need to end tax exemptions, essentially, for multinationals. We can't have unfair business taxes. President von der Leyen committed to relaunching a digital tax if the OECD didn't come to an agreement on that, and so now she needs to comply. We can't have taxpayers' money, in addition, funding governments that violate the rule of law. Yesterday we learned that around 8 in 10 of European citizens are in favour of linking European funding with adherence to fundamental and democratic values. We need to do that. Not doing it would frustrate the hopes of millions of Europeans and will push them into anti-Europeanism. We need to act, because if we act decisively, we can ensure the future of current and future generations. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Garcia Perez. Let me now give the floor to Dacian Cioloș for the Renew Group, please.
President, dear Charles, dear Maros, dear Michel, dear colleagues, the European Union's future relation with the United Kingdom has reached a critical point. The EU was always willing to negotiate, but Mr. Johnson's government preferred political games. From the beginning of the campaign of the referendum until now, he played games. The EU wants and needs a strong partnership with our UK neighbours, but for that to happen, we need a serious partner. And serious partnership should have a clear understanding. Firstly, we will not ratify any trade deal as long as the withdrawal agreement is not fully respected, especially the protocol on Northern Ireland. Secondly, my group will only give its consent to an agreement that protects the interests of European citizens and is fair and beneficial for our economy. Any possible deal should ensure a level playing field, as you said, Michel, have an effective mechanism of governance, be fair when it comes to fisheries, and respect our strict data protection norms, and we insist on that also. If the United Kingdom wants a deal, which it's in the best interest of the UK citizens also, its government needs to sit at the negotiating table until one is reached, and stop playing delaying tactics. And Michel, you have our full support on your work. Dear President, dear colleagues, let me say some words on pandemics also. Europe is on the brink of a second wave of COVID-19 pandemics. The coordination of free movement requested by my political group and the Parliament is a step forward, but we must strengthen operational coordination at EU level. We have to urgently prepare in order to mitigate the serious social and economic hardship this second wave will cause to our citizens. The European Commission and Member States cannot allow themselves to work in anything less than a coordinated manner and learn from the mistake we witnessed last spring. The cost of national selfishness is too high and is simply unacceptable. Furthermore, I hope it is now clear for everyone that we need a European health policy to complement national ones. And this coordination on health will not be enough. We need investment, common investment, and we need the elements and the budget for a real European tools on health policy. Let me end by saying, dear Charles, that this issue of health and COVID coordination should be, in my opinion, on the agenda of every single European Council in the next months until we are out of this crisis, because the coordination and exchange of information is essential for that. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Bay, please, for the Identity and Democracy Group.
Thank you, President. On the 31st of December, in line with the democratic will expressed by the United Kingdom 4 years ago, the UK will become a third country with no deal. And Brussels' position throughout these years of negotiation has always been to punish the British people because they decided to cause the most painful split possible. After the backspot, the Commission is still seeking to keep the UK on a short leash, seeking to impose the case law of the European Court of Human Rights and to impose its own rules on state aid. But the fact is that this was never going to work, and Boris Johnson has shown how fragile this intransigence is, since just after his election, he was able to renegotiate the deal that had been worked on with Theresa May, a deal you said could never be changed. As a French Member of Parliament elected in Normandy, I am very worried about fisheries, a key issue for our countries today, and for mine in particular. Germany has already underscored that it's favourable to concessions, and you yourself, Mr. Barnier, recently said that we had to be realistic, and I quote, when it comes to access to British waters. So it will be either weakness or a no deal, the lack of an agreement. And, of course, the perspective of failure is not one that's pleasing to me, but unlike what you've been saying for the past 4 years, the consequences of a no deal would be much worse for the EU than for the UK. You've done things the wrong way round. Rather than a broad agreement imposing your ideology, what you should have done was to base the agreement on fisheries. But you refuse to enter into these relations because the thing you fear most is a future trade war. The EU was supposed to give us prosperity, stability, strength, power on the global stage. Following the United States, China and Turkey, well, it's the UK showing that European institutions, as things stand, due to their functioning and due to their political leanings, are leading to the collective weakness of our nations and of our continent.
Thank you, Mr. Bay. Now, Mrs. Keller for the Greens, please.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, with regards to climate, those were very poor Council conclusions, indeed. Or can I even call them conclusions, because the only thing that leaders could agree on was that they had actually talked about that. We are in the midst of a rapidly progressing climate crisis, and postponement of action is a mistake. This year again looks set to break any sort of records with regards to climate crisis, be it on heat waves, droughts intensity, extreme weather events, Arctic shield loss, etc., etc. So let me be very clear. Deciding to talk about climate later is failing to grasp the urgency of this task. We have to act now, and we have to act decisively. at all levels and also at all policy areas. And the compromise found by the European Parliament on reducing greenhouse gases by 60% by 2030 is a good step forward. And some of you have said it's an ambitious target, but it's not so much ambitious. It's more a realistic target if we really want to save our planet. And member states should sign up to it quickly, to the 60% goal, so we can finally start acting. The climate doesn't wait, and neither should we. And yes, the economic transformation needed for that is no walk in the park, especially for regions with a long-standing tradition of carbon-intensive economies. And that's why the Parliament is insisting to have a proper-sized Just Transition Fund, among others, as part of a new EU budget, because you need to put the money where your policy targets is. You need to put the money where you want to have the EU fit for the tasks ahead, and that requires adequate funding, and any government should know that. We need to have a climate spending target of 30% and a biodiversity target of 10% in order to be up for the tasks ahead. And the EU funds also need to advance our union's values. That's why compliance with rule of law must be an essential criteria for allocating the funds. And these are critical elements in the Parliament's position on the EU budget and recovery fund. It is just inadmissible that the Council disregards such fundamental concerns. As for Brexit, it's very sad to see that so much time has passed without any agreement being reached on our future relations. We're approaching the end of a time limit, and I want to just remind us that, of course, the UK government could have asked for an extension, and they decided not to. But it's also clear that we cannot accept a deal that would endanger the single market, social rights or environmental standards. So further work is needed to that, and we're still extremely sad that Brexit was decided, but now we need to see that we also ensure the union's togetherness. We're again holding this meeting under very exceptional circumstances. We're in the midst of a big medical crisis. Let us learn from the EU response in the spring. Let us now be more coordinated, more cohesive, and make sure that border restrictions will be avoided. And it's an exceptional year in many different ways, and the Council needs to step up if it's ready to face those challenges. Thank you.
Grazie. Per il gruppo...
Thank you. Now, Mr. Epping for the European Conservatives and Reformist Group.
De Europese Raad is eigenlijk geëindigd in één conclusie. Groot-Brittannië...
Thank you very much, President. Well, the European Council has reached some conclusions. Now, on the United Kingdom, we know Boris Johnson's history, and we all need to be aware of what might happen if there is a no deal. Now, when it comes to fisheries, I think the positions of the two sides are particularly distant. The United Kingdom wants to recover its sovereignty vis-à-vis its fishermen. Well, what's going to happen after Brexit? I think there is a key element here, and I think the Netherlands needs to stand by its fishermen if they're abandoned by the European Union. We don't know what's going to happen. We hope an agreement can be achieved. But if there is no agreement, what's going to happen, Mr. Barnier? What's going to be the fate of our fishermen if there is a no-deal Brexit? Now, obviously, we can play the blame game, but we risk finding ourselves in a difficult situation, particularly for countries with significant fishing sectors. There'll be bilateral agreements with the United Kingdom on fisheries in that case, and the example is Norway, which has a bilateral fishing agreement with the United Kingdom. Flanders, Denmark are also going to be affected. So I think there are examples, there are models here. French fishermen find their resources, can get resources from all over the place. We're a smaller country, and we need to try and preserve our opportunities when it comes to fishing. We will not abandon this national interest for us. It's heavily anchored in Dutch culture, and we need to support Dutch fishermen at all at any price. So bilateral negotiations, if there is a failure, need to remain possible. It's true that we've had 400 years' worth of conflict with the British, but we need to do better this time. Thank you.
Papadimoulis, prego.
Thank you very much. Mr. Papadimoulis now, please.
I would just like to mention 2 points, addressing myself mainly to the Council, Mr. Michel. First point. Stop coddling Mr. Erdogan. You are sending the long message, and this is why he keeps escalating, not only against Greece and Cyprus, but against the EU itself as well. What happened, Mr. Michel and Mr. Šefčovič, to the list of what was presented by Mr. Borrell in order to sanction Turkey? When are we going to see this list of sanctions in writing at the summit in order to be approved side by side with the dialogue agenda that you are proposing? Because we see in the summit the German presidency always kicking the can down the road. We started talking about it in June, then it went to September, and now you're talking about December. We need to show severity towards Erdogan. Second, the severity of the second wave of the pandemic means that we need to take drastic actions in order to protect public health, the economy and society. So, apart from the positive point of the fund, the European Parliament, with agreement of 5 political groups, the EPP, the Liberals, the Socialists, the Greens and the Left, we have asked for a more ambitious budget. So, I would like to ask you, the Council, listen to the declaration that the President, Mr. Sassoli, made yesterday, and stop bullying the European Parliament, accusing us through fake news that we are the ones blocking an agreement. In order to have an agreement, the Council has to move towards our positions as well. The European Parliament has already moved away from its initial positions, but you have to meet us halfway in order to have some positive decisions right away, because this is what the citizens are asking, according to yesterday's Eurobarometer. So both the summit and the Council will have to make some steps in our direction. Thank you very much.
Grazie, Dimitrios.
Thank you, Dimitrios. Now for the non-attached members, we have Mr. Papadakis connected from Athens. You have 1.5 minutes, sir.
The dangerous developments in the Greek-Turkish relationship means that all of the Greek governments have failed because they have made themselves the lapdog of the US interests. And the EU, which used to be a safe haven, is now transformed into a slow-moving boat. So, in that way, they are trying to hide the powerful geopolitical interests that connect Germany, Italy, Spain, and the rest with Turkey. The EU and NATO cannot stop the activity of the bourgeois class of Turkey, and in that way they cannot bring about peace. So what we are seeing, all this activity, the NAVTEX by Turkey, the search and rescue activities, the fact that they're drilling in the Cyprus EEZ, the fact that they have opened up the closed city of Varosha, then they are also sending army in Syria, Libya and elsewhere. So all of those things, sanctions and the talk about sanctions, is just a game played by the bourgeois classes, and in the end it is being paid by the working class. So we should do nothing for the EU and the US. So the peoples have to struggle in order to overturn the plans of the imperialists that will take place on their backs.
Che i nostri sistemi tecnici
Thank you. Well, we see that our